Actually, it's not yes.
I expand this. I wonder if you ever might.
Guys, good afternoon. Thanks for being here today. I'm sorry we got snowed out last time, but I really appreciate what a good job you did on the direct discussions. I was interested in what you had to say, and I was planning on, and I would have you go back in and tell you to do another round, but I think you did a nice job engaging, and that gets me so encouraged for our discussions when we're in Vietnam, because that's what we want to do, is talk to each other as well as interacting with our speakers. So we have two excellent speakers. And in between there, I'm going to talk about, I've updated the Google site with all of the information about, you see it already? Oh, good, okay. All the information about our flights and some travel tips. I know some of you are starting to pack. Think about mosquitoes. There's mosquito issues in a number of different ways. And just to give you a sense, next time we're going to talk more about all of that packing stuff. Connor, that wasn't for you. I've had mosquito questions from multiple people. So they're just hiding and blaming it all on you. So next time we're going to talk about that as well as packing and some more about our trip. But this week we have some excellent speakers that are going to set the tone really nicely for where we're going. A number of you know Professor McCornak from undergrad, from teaching in the econ department. He's a lecturer here in the Selinger School, and he teaches internationally. So he is all over the world, and he's married to a woman from Vietnam. He spends part of his year in Vietnam as well. He is regularly quoted. I think I've sent you at least one or two of his articles in the Vietnamese press about different economic issues. And he's going to give us a sense for having lived in Vietnam, sort of watching the progression of Vietnam as it becomes more market-based in over the last couple of decades. So please join me in welcoming Mr. McCornak.
Okay, let me see if well, I have a little presentation because sometimes it's good to see pictures. As long as I can, let me see if I can figure out how to make it into a slideshow, right? Okay. Yeah, okay. I can never, I can't do this with this. Okay. What I will do initially is I'll sort of explain my relationship to Vietnam and talk about a little what I did, and then we can talk more about, say, modern Vietnam. These are, as you can see here, these are just some pictures, actually most of them which I took when I first went there. I first went to Vietnam in 1994, okay, before maybe some of you were born. I didn't go there during the Vietnam War era or whatever. Oh, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. And then just page. Okay. But where's page down? So yeah, I'm not good with these things. Okay, there it is. Okay. But you will find out that when people of my generation, when you think of Vietnam, they think of it in terms of a war. Okay? And I always tell people Vietnam is a war, not a country. Okay? But even nowadays, they're talking about Vietnam veterans and coming back and the way they were treated. But it really is, it's a country. And number one, it's also one country. People still say, were you in North Vietnam or South Vietnam? And I would say, well, I was in Southern Vietnam or I was in Northern Vietnam, but it's actually one country. Okay, now, let me just, this is a history lesson in about 1 minute. The war in terms of Vietnam's been fighting wars for 3,000 years. And then if you look at it in terms of it was controlled by China, then it was French colonization, and then the idea in 1945, Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam a republic, whatever. And then they finally got the French out in a place called Dien Bien Phu. And then this started really what is called, Americans know it as the Vietnam War, Vietnamese know it as the American War. Okay? So if you look at English articles in terms of Vietnam, it's always the American. Okay? And then it goes from, say, 1975 to 1986. Vietnam won the war, and they lost the peace. In other words, their system really didn't work. Their economy collapsed. Both people willing to risk their lives. I mean, nowadays you see about both people leaving. Well, Vietnam was like that, 40, 50 years ago. They were willing to risk everything because it was so bad. And then finally, in 1986, they decided we need to change our system. And so they have something called doi moi, which is translated as economic renovation. And it was this idea of we are going to, being Vietnam, we're going to start to let the market work a little bit. It really was following China. Right? If you look at China as being here, Vietnam is always about 10 years behind. I first got involved in Vietnam. Basically, 1986 started doi moi, 1994. From 1986 to 1994, it was this, they were changing, but inflation was 400% because the movement from a communist system to a market system had really never been done. It was always, the countries became communism, but then how do you go the other way? And it was always, to me, best described as, how do you unmake the omelet? You knew how to crack the eggs to make the omelet, but now how do you go the omelet to make the back into the egg? I ended up going to Vietnam. I was working in Japan, teaching at a Japanese university, and I saw something that said, would you like, anybody like to come to Vietnam? And what I always joked at is teach market economics to the communists. And I thought, ooh, that sounds interesting. So I applied, and I got it. I was surprised. The other person I was with, he and his wife, he was from Harvard. This other one was from MIT, and then they took me. But I think they took me because I had international experience. I arrived actually in January of 1994. In February of 1994, the U.S. lifted, February 4th, listed the economic embargo, and Vietnam started to kind of open up. And really, from 1994, it really changed. When I went to 1994, Vietnam was listed as one of the 10 poorest countries in the world. There was no building over 10 feet, over like 5 stories tall in the entire country. It was poor. 10 o'clock at night, you could drive down, and think about this when you go to Hanoi this time. I used to drive on my bicycle at 10 o'clock at night, and I'd be the only person, or my friend and I would be the only people on the street. Now, when you look at Hanoi, the changes are just amazing. And then this is just slowly Vietnam became more integrated in terms of the world economy. They started trade things. So you can look at here. And I kind of full member in 1995, full member of ASEAN. They became a member of the WTO. They started with TPP, but that ended up really never going through after Trump decided he wanted to get rid of it. And so it's slowly becoming integrated in the economy. No, I can never, All right. That's me, in 1994. It was the world's worst chalkboard. It was the world's worst chalk. You write on the board, and it was, I have one picture. Well, I can't find that picture anymore, but it was just, you'd sweat like crazy. No air conditioning, no projector, and you'd have 50 people in the class. Most of them were much older than you. Most of them were in their 30s, 40s. I had one man in his 50s, And what they were government officials, college professors, some business people, related to government organizations, who had some of them PhDs in finance, PhDs in economics, and didn't know what a supply curve was, didn't know what the stock market was. Why? Because there wasn't a stock market. They had learned in Germany, East Germany, they learned in Russia, and they had learned all this theory, but they really theory of value. But it was interesting. There was always one member, and she or he was a big member of the Communist Party. They just wanted to make sure you checked on everything. But it was wonderful. And actually that was, it's kind of hard to see, but that was my first class. This was 1994. It was funded by the Ford Foundation. Why? Because they realized if you're going to change to a market economy, you had to do what? You had to learn market economic principles. This was at a goat restaurant. okay, with one of my friends. This one ends up, he's now a vice minister with the government. He's doing very well. Helps that his uncle is the minister. This one became a millionaire, okay, just because then he ended up marrying a woman whose father became a millionaire. So some people did very well, okay?
What's a goat restaurant?
They serve goat. Yeah, it's all for goat, yeah. Right? That's why you see the little goat out there, okay? Yeah, the specialty
Like
was
goat
goat.
milk or like goat?
Goat,
Like goat.
goat cut up and yeah. It wasn't bad, okay? It's one of those things at that time, most of you will not, you may see places that are kind of that, I would say that dirty, but not that, you know, it wasn't the cleanest place in the world, but it was fun, right? And this is the backyard, or this was out the back window of the house I lived in, okay? So I actually lived in, you know, it was a nice position, but we didn't live very well. And I always, this is just, you know, I always thought if this woman could talk, this is what, you know, the experiences she would have gone through. Okay. I just look at this one, and I don't know, I wish I could get rid of the top here, but okay, this is the difference. If you look at, say, and then ended up real quick, I went there in 1994, I taught for a semester. I liked it, apparently they liked me, and a year later they invited me back again, so I taught another program with the Ford Foundation. And then a year later, there was a Swedish program that was starting an MBA, so I got invited and I went there for a year. And then I ended up staying for about 8. And I worked for this sort of a Swedish development, and I worked for German, and I just actually worked for different places. And I actually did a lot of teaching, okay? A lot of starting programs at universities, okay? But I like this cartoon. When anybody growing rapidly, but the economy, right? Remember when they would just come in and burn our villages, right? But now you go, it's Pizza Hut. Yes, there is Pizza Hut there. Pizza Hut is popular. McDonald's they have in Ho Chi Minh. I don't know if it's in Hanoi yet. KFC has been there. One of my former students is like the vice president of KFC. They don't have Kmart, etc. Okay, so it's really become more integrated. I think what you'll find when you go there, it's going to be a whole lot more modern than you think. You're going to be surprised. At the same time, you'll say, oh, I can't believe the poverty. But at the same time, you'll say, this is much more modern than I think. All right. You all know about the economy, but when you think of Vietnam, what do you think of? When you think of Vietnam, what do you think of? Okay, agriculture, okay? In terms of what? Right. Vietnam is what, in terms of the world's exporters of rice. What do you think it is? Okay, somewhere. Okay, I've seen it as high as number 2. Right? In terms of people are very amazed at the idea of how much rice it exports. And remember that when I was there 20 years ago, there were people that were suffering from malnutrition because they didn't have enough rice. It's also one of the world's largest exporters of coffee. Right? But have anybody ever had Vietnamese coffee? Yeah, okay. It's very strong. It's more French, okay? And there's sort of 2 types of coffee. What is it? Arabica and something else. Whatever the coffee that Vietnam has is kind of different than tends to be. Okay? I don't like it particularly. Because it's too strong for me. I'm one of these, you know, I go to a Vietnamese coffee place and they give me the coffee and you'll see it. Give me a whole thing of hot water so I can water it down. I'm a pain in the neck. Yeah, but this is sort of like their equivalent of Starbucks. They do have Starbucks over there, but I don't think Starbucks is doing well because the other coffee is much better. That's this kind of, but it's a coffee and also, oil. But shoes, my shoes made in Vietnam, okay? Shoes, clothing, a lot of clothing is made. You go to the bookstore, and I like to look at, whenever I go to the bookstore, I like to figure out where things are made, and it's all made in Vietnam. Okay? That's this idea, that may be a typical factory. Why is it that they make things like, you know, like clothing, etc.? Because it's very labor intensive. All right? And then just, just talk a little bit. You probably read all about it. What are Vietnam's strengths? Actually, if you look at Vietnam now, it's looked at as one of the big countries that's growing. Okay? Why? Big reason is labor costs. Labor costs in China are going up. China is still developing rather rapidly. So now a lot of companies are saying, instead of going to China, we'll open up our factory in Vietnam. And one country that is now putting, and they have for a long time, but they're putting a lot more, is actually Japan. Japan is becoming more of a foreign investor in Vietnam. You go Vietnam, I see advertisements for Japanese language teachers at schools because because it's the cheap labor, okay? Low cost labor, relatively hard working. I can debate that maybe, okay? Living over there for about 8 or 10 years, okay? High productivity in some sectors, relatively educated. And that's always one of these things they always, when I was in Vietnam in 1994, it's almost like, 95% of the people are educated. And then I always say, what do they know? If you know all about the Russian theory of something or the East German, does it really apply? And the education system has, to me, certainly a lot of problems. One is corruption. Right? Abundant natural resources. That's one thing that Vietnam has. People may say, we don't like communism. Okay? And I always get angry. They always say, well, in communist Vietnam, in a newspaper article, why? Why don't they just say, okay, in capitalist America or whatever, okay? They always say, well, communism, okay? It's not necessary. It's just sort of, to me, a prejudice. But the only positive, because communism doesn't work, because I kind of lived under it in a sense, okay? Taught a lot of people, they're good drinkers. Okay? Every once in a while you'd have a class and then they'd say, oh, we're having a party. Why? Because the local communist party was having a meeting. And they'd invite us actually afterwards to go drinking. So people say, what are the communists like? I would say that they're drinking. In this case, the only advantage is it's stable. You don't necessarily like what you have, but it's stable. It's a one-party system. So sometimes it's easier to deal with. And the weaknesses is, yes, corruption. Right? Corruption in terms of politics, etc. Big problem now, okay? Well, pace of reform, this idea of state-owned enterprises are not becoming privatized fast enough. Actually, they don't use the word privatize. They use the word equitize. Right? Because privatized, really is too capitalist. Right? Income disparity. That's what you'll find. I walked down the street and saw a Rolls Royce. Okay, it's like beautiful houses, and then walked down and saw utter poverty. I can walk in Hanoi, and I know Hanoi very well. Like I said, I've lived there for a long time. Where places has changed unbelievably the difference. Most modern thing you'd see, modern hotel, modern building. And then you walk a couple more blocks and you'd see some little shop that hasn't changed in 20 years. Right? So it really is, that's one thing you'll notice about. Okay? You'll notice about the environment. Okay? In Hanoi, Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City, no matter what day, it's polluted. Traffic is a problem. Traffic is terrible. Be careful when you cross the street. Hey, a little later, if you ask me, I'll give you a hint how to cross the street. Okay? But it's very, very important. Okay? Don't look at the cars. Okay? Okay? And you can see some of this other one. In terms of the exchange, $1 is $22,000. Right? People don't, right? When I went, it was 11,000. We used to joke, how'd you become a billionaire in Vietnam? Start out as a millionaire. But that was an old, okay? So how do you become a millionaire in Vietnam? Start out as a billionaire. Okay? But you will be a billionaire or a millionaire in terms of dong. But Vietnam actually is doing rather well. There are a lot of okay, very well-to-do people, you know, businesses that are doing very well. Okay. Let's see. I mentioned that, okay? The environment is a problem, okay? The air quality, okay? Vietnam actually has a big problem due to climate change, where the sea is kind of rising and it's hurting shrimp farms because the water is becoming too salty. Okay? That actually is not so bad. Okay? It really, okay, that looks, no, seriously, people think that's crowded. It really isn't. If you want an experience, okay, because I used to come over that bridge all the time, I would take the bus. I rode a motorcycle for a while. Okay? Then I take the bus, sit in the front seat, and you look at the driver with his sandals on, you know, driving in, you know, traffic. If you want to really, okay, have an experience, that's the thing to do. Yeah, good thing it isn't rush hour. And I'm not kidding. That is not necessarily rush hour. Okay? That's what you'll find. But in terms of Vietnam's economy, it's done very well. It's becoming more open. Couple misperceptions that people have. People tend to have this idea that Vietnam is communist, China isn't communist, so they're buddies. No. The Vietnamese, they don't like the Chinese. However, okay, and I'm not saying they don't. Okay? But it's one of these ideas that they understand that China is very important. Okay? And so in terms of, if you look at economic and politics, I describe it, and you can look in, you know, type my name, and there's a couple older articles, and I got quoted recently, but it's all in Vietnamese, so I didn't give that to anybody. But it was this idea that I always equate that Vietnam is like a bird on a wire. This is holding one end is China, and holding the other end is the United States. And Vietnam's kind of in the middle, okay? Or sometimes you would say it's like on a tightrope. And it's not sure, it doesn't want to move too much closer to China. There's friction because of what's called the South China problem. But it doesn't really want to get too close to the US. So it's okay because it has to worry about China. So it's sort of in the middle, and it tries to have good relationships with the rest of the world because it knows it's in the middle. Actually, right now, the economy in Vietnam is doing very well. Right? The statistics, the growth rate, et cetera, inflation tends not to be a problem. If anything, it's more of the things such as pollution and income inequality. Okay, and then finally, I'll just sum up. It still has a long way to go, which you'll see. I always look at it. It's about never been to China. Vietnam is about 10 steps behind China. China, there's a famous expression by, I think it was Deng Xiaoping, but said something about cross the river by feeling the stones. And that was the movement from, say, communism to market economics. And it was this idea that says, okay, over there is the market system, but we're not going to just jump over the river. So, okay, because that could be actually what Russia did. It became problematic. So it's like, oh, we'll try this change. If it works, we'll change it. We'll try this change. If it doesn't work, we'll come back. So that's sort of the pace of reform. And I look at it as here's Vietnam, and they're looking at China, and they're saying, okay, whatever China, they kind of follow. So they're a little bit behind because they're not making the changes because they really want to see how does it work in terms of China, even though they don't necessarily get along that well. They know they need each other. Okay? Will it be a modern economic power? May, in a sense, get forced into this middle income trap, okay? Kind of like Thailand. Right? but I have to give it credit, okay? It's made more remarkable progress since I've been here. Like I said, it's been 23 years now when I first went. And it's a whole different world, at least in terms of the city. Some of the countryside, I can go there and it hasn't changed. People, I like them, okay? I find that in terms of Vietnamese people, that I find people say, oh, about, what about the war and all this other stuff, okay? Well, number one, the majority of the population is, say, under 30. So most people, they weren't there, so that's why they don't think. But most of you, was before your time. Even the older generation, they were fighting the Chinese for 1,000 years. They were fighting the French, right? So the idea that looking back, holding grudges doesn't make any sense. My father-in-law, he fought in the military. He fought for the North. He was a musical director from the Northern Army. I never felt like, I don't like you, When I taught in Hanoi. I had a man who, he was a pilot, and he showed me the idea that, he had a scar, he was shot down in the mid. But I never felt like there was this idea that, I always felt like you are, you're American, but you're a good guy. And there has always been this difference where it's this idea that American people are a little bit different than the government. The government sends their people to fight, but people, they just do what the government says. So it's not like it's personal. But you'll find it's just a lovely place, okay? You'll find amazing. There's only 3 here. Sometimes I've seen 5 or 6 on a motorcycle. That's what you'll be most impressed in. How did they put all that on a motorcycle? Okay, so that pretty much, I think, do I have one? Okay. Yeah, I just sort of have, that's actually me with a little, I went over there and taught, maybe 8 or 9 years ago with a class, and mostly they're accounting students or young people. It was Christmas. This is me sitting at a party, okay, which it wasn't the cleanest, but that's sort of all my relatives, okay? This is interesting. I was staying at this little hotel visiting, and these 4 little kids come running up to me. The cutest thing you can see. They just looked at me and said, hello, and they all said, F you. And I kind of thought, okay, but they smiled. Why? Because that's the only English word they probably heard, or my impression that I got is that they heard it, or there was a movie on TV, they heard it, and people get reaction from this thing. So they actually eventually was, what is your name or whatever, but I just thought that, but you never have to take it personal. Right? And then this is just sort of, there's beautiful beaches, and people always have this image of Vietnam, and that's it. I took that picture when I was driving in the countryside. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'll open up to questions. Yes, sir.
So you said one of their strengths was political stability, but one of their biggest weaknesses was corruption.
In terms of political stability, right? I guess I look at it this way. I know I'm teaching an economics class. I always say what people have the most trouble dealing with is uncertainty. And I give the example of if you have a boss that's always nice, then you have no trouble going to his or her office. If you have a boss that's always meaning, you know what to do. You know how to not go, you just avoid him or her. But if you have a boss or a colleague that's sometimes really nice and sometimes really mean, whenever you want to go and you know you have to talk to that person, your heart kind of flutters and it's like, what's going to be the reaction? And the political stability is this idea is maybe you know it's difficult to do things in terms of business. Maybe you know you have to pay off, but at least you know that. Okay? You know what you're getting into. And the corruption, you people, yeah, you do have to make payments. I mean, I had it when I got married. I had to pay to get some form. Why? Because you have to grease the wheels. You have to do that sometimes, right? A lot of it is petty corruption, $5 here, whatever. Right? Corruption may be in terms of corporations or companies in terms of paying off whatever, but that happens here all the time. Right? I mean, and I think my idea is in Vietnam or developing countries, they call it corruption. In America, you call it lobbying. And so, but if you know how to deal with it, it's not the problem. They're trying to change things, okay? And there's a lot of campaigns, anti-corruption and things like that. And people will say, oh, it's just the Vietnamese way of doing it. And I would talk about that when I was teaching a class in Vietnam, and I said, it's the Vietnamese way, you have to pay the bribe. And I said, oh, or the culture. Oh, and then I get this reaction. No, I said, well, you just told me it was the Vietnamese way. I said, oh, and it was a matter of, it was just, that's the way things have been done. That tends to really happen in a communist system, right? Especially when the market is changing. Okay? When you go into the market, people are willing to pay for access, and that's where the corruption comes. Right? So it's a matter of what you're going to get. You may not like it, but at least you know that. So I don't think they're that opposite. Oh, yeah.
Just with the traffic, how long does it take you to go, say, like 2 miles in that city? I feel like it'd almost be faster just to walk.
If you can figure out where to walk. Okay? And that's one of the problems. Now, I know you're staying downtown in what's yeah, which I know exactly where that is. And in that area, it's actually not that bad to walk around. The only problem is they have the streets and then they have the sidewalks. And there's no rule, or there may be, but nobody follows it, about parking motorcycles on the sidewalk. So what you find out is you say, oh, I would like to walk on the sidewalk. There's two problems walking on the sidewalk. Number one is they make these sidewalks out of bricks, which have kind of settled. So the sidewalks are very uneven. So I don't like to walk on them because, I trip sometimes. You have to be really careful. But number two, you have to go around all the motorcycles. So half the time you have to go out into the street. Okay, so there are certain sections, and now downtown by the lake, they a couple times a week, they kind of close off the area. So it depends on where you're going. It depends on the time of day. If it's rush hour, it may take a while, yeah. But in terms of walking, you do have to be careful, okay? And you have to be careful crossing the street. And that's, anybody that's ever been to Vietnam will tell you the exact same thing. It's just a matter of, it's difficult to find a stoplight, right? But nowadays, it's actually downtown, it's better. There are actually, and the big difference now between 10 years ago and now is before, out of 10 motorcycles, 8 would stop. Now, maybe 8, okay? Well, so out of 10 motorcycles, maybe 3 would stop, and 8 would go through the red light. Nowadays, the traffic is a little bit better. They control it. So that if you come to a green light, a red light, you can cross the street. It's okay. If there's other sections where the distance between where you cross is okay. So when you cross the street, people are always, but traffic's always coming. And you never, it's really difficult to find a place where there's no traffic coming. So when people cross the street, and you'll figure this out, is don't go like this, and then if you see somebody coming, get scared. Sometimes, you can go on video and people say cross the street in Vietnam. Don't look. Right? Why? Because, and I'm serious, the motorcycles will anticipate you. So what they'll do is they'll see you and then they'll swerve around you, or they'll move to the side because they know you're crossing the street. But if you do something different, they don't know what's going on. But it's one of these things you'll say, oh, okay, you'll have to learn when you get it. You just have to, that's one thing I would say, be very, very careful. Yes.
I was in Shenzhen probably 15 years ago. At the time, it was called the Wild West of China. And I witnessed one time we were driving down the highway, really fast highway, and this car came rolling down really fast down an on-ramp, and then stopped, and he went backwards up it. And so at the time, they were saying, really don't walk on the sidewalks, except if you follow locals who are, just stay really close to locals because they know how to deal with the traffic. So on your own, don't step out into traffic, but if there's a group of Vietnamese that are crossing the street, glom onto the group.
Yeah, look, sometimes you're there and then I just kind of follow you. But I mean, where you're staying, like the New Hilton, I think that in that area, it's actually not that bad to walk around. But if you kind of get other places, you have to be. That's just, and I think probably, yeah, in Saigon probably, depends on where you are. Okay? But some of the tourists, they're a little bit bad. So it's one of these things you just have to be careful.
And so women, especially, I've had students that have twisted ankles on this low heels, really comfortable shoes because the sidewalks, don't give you terrible looks. The sidewalks are not going to be very good, and it will be so really do comfortable shoes that you're not going to twist.
Yeah, I would be, good comfortable shoes. And in terms of, if anybody has any questions in terms of wallets and stuff, my advice is don't put anything in your back pocket. Okay, it's a safe country. Okay, you're not going to get shot or stabbed or whatever, but there's petty theft. Okay, I remember last time I was there, I was walking and there was this guy up ahead, and it was a foreigner, and had this wallet coming out, and I just I was walking with the Vietnamese, and I think it was the tour guide, and I just kind of got up to them and says, I'm not trying to be, tell you what to do, but I'd be real careful. And then the tourist guide kind of, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. And so, so what I do is, and when they take credit cards, a lot of places, that's a big difference in the last couple of years. I always have everything right here, and I just put it in my front pocket. Any of my money, I have a money clip. And that's what you'll do. Okay, so that's just easier to deal with. That's to be safe. Okay.
The neck pouches you have that you put your sleeve, your lips to get in, those are fabulous. You put a good bit in, and you can right inside the shirt, and then there's nothing exposed at all. Like the pockets.
And you won't have to carry your passport around. Okay, the hotels will ask you for your passport. They'll either have a safe in the room. Used to be the first time they always say, we're going to keep your passport. I said, no, you don't want to. And then after a while, I said, yeah, keep my passport. It was safer at the front desk. But there's not any reason to carry your passport around. And in Bangkok, I know they require like a copy of your passport, which is, I just give a paper, I'll take my passport. But in Vietnam, if you change money or whatever, which you can do at a bank, generally they they won't ask you for your passport. But my suggestion is photocopy the first page of your passport and put it in your wallet. Yes, sir.
How do you say thank you?
Come on. Come on. It's like C-A-M-O-N. Come on.
How do you say hi?
Hi. Xin Chao. Yeah. X-I-N-C-H-O. Yeah. But it's very tonal. Man. My Vietnamese is terrible. It's very tonal. I'm a living translator, so I'm lucky. Oh, sorry.
What percent of Vietnamese speak English?
Probably a lot more than you would think. Yes. Okay. And I always find it interesting. The elderly will speak either French or Russian. Okay, sort of like elderly will speak French. Okay, because and then you'll have maybe the next generation may speak some Russian, but a lot of anybody like 30, they will generally know some English. Okay, but if you go to most of these, a hotel or tourist places or whatever, they'll learn enough. There's enough English to get there, okay? And you'll be sort of in the big city, so you'll be surprised that how much English they know, right? Yes.
What are some customs or gestures that might not mean anything to us, but
Don't point. Don't point. Okay? That's the key. Don't kind of like don't sit on the chair, okay, and put your feet up. Okay? When you get, okay, in most, you probably, I don't know how many, you probably won't go into people's houses, so you have to take off your shoes or something like that. Don't be too, loud, right? Not that Vietnamese, they're very noisy, whatever, okay? But just don't walk around like you're, like, oh, I'm better than that, yeah.
On that similar note, so I was reading an article and it was saying that they don't like when you tip in restaurants.
They like it, but it's not
So I was like,
it's the beauty of Japan and Vietnam and many Asian countries is they don't tip, which makes it a lot easier. What you may find if you go to a nicer restaurant, they may charge you a service charge. Okay? If you go to a little beer place or whatever, the thing you're going to find is how many places there are. And those places, they'll give you, if they give you 10 cents change, they'll give it back to you. So it's a matter of, they don't expect the tip. The Vietnamese don't tip. Sometimes when I go, if it's just a little bit, I just sort of leave it there. They don't feel insulted. Okay? The thing is, what you may find is if you go to a place and you really like the waiter or waitress or whatever, the server, and if you tip on the credit card, most likely he or she's not going to get it. It'll basically go to, the restaurant. So it's not like, oh, they share the tips. So, if you really like, yeah.
While you're on food, talking about restaurants and the ability to eat off of food carts and things on the street. Great.
Nowadays, there's tons of restaurants that are, what I would consider to be, fairly high quality in terms of health standards. And you walk down one street, and actually the new Hilton is right here. And right there is a place called D Savoy, DYS something of it, hotel. That's my favorite restaurant. I would go there every other day for lunch. Okay? And they have a great menu. But I would, if you're only going there for 10 days, I'd say if you see a pho, the noodle place, that's relatively safe because it's all, the broth is just cooked for hours and hours, okay? So the pho places may not be that, from the outside, like, oh, it's a little bit. But most restaurants, especially that are indoor, are going to be fine. I would be
more of a breakfast food for them, though?
Pho is kind of breakfast and evening. Yeah, okay? But, I mean, a lot of it is, it does, and you'll find out you go to Hanoi and the pho is much better in Hanoi. Okay? But it is one of these things where the typical Vietnamese will go to work, at 7:30 or 8, and then work for 2 hours or whatever they do. And then at 10 o'clock, they go to the pho restaurant and kind of have it. Yeah, so it's good. Yeah. But pho places may be open most of the time. And there's a couple, fancier pho places. Okay? But I would avoid, if somebody has, a cart and just pushing it around, okay? I would tend to maybe avoid doing that if you're only going to go for 10. Right? When I go, I tend to be a little, don't care that much. I kind of think I have my stomach trained or whatever because I live there so long. But I would say be careful, but I would not worry too much. Right? I mean, I think people have this idea, oh, I got to be really careful. Oh, okay. And you're going to find out, no, worry is going to make you not feel well. Right? So just, you'll sort of, you'll see. What the first one was what?
Disease.
Right now, I don't think there's any problems with any, I remember being there when they had SARS, but mosquitoes, I never worried about it. Okay? Especially if you're going to be in the cities. And I think I mentioned, this was like 94, 95 or 96. I remember going to this clinic, and this guy was a specialist in tropical medicine, and I kind of asked him, what about mosquitoes here? And he said, because I think when I went there in 1994, they would say, oh, take this whatever it was, some kind of like pill you were supposed to take for anti-malaria or whatever, okay? But it gave you bad nightmares, and so we took it for like 2 weeks until we didn't like it. And he said, don't take that stuff. He said, if you get it, we'll take care of you. But over time, what is happening is in the cities, they kind of take care of it. It's really not a problem. And I hardly ever hear of anybody, getting problems in terms of malaria in the cities. Right? I mean, I know that, I remember going to Africa, and I was there for a while, and then I came back and the 2 people got malaria. But in Vietnam, not unless you're really in the hills or whatever. So I wouldn't be, and certainly if your doctor says, "Oh, take these malaria pills," my feeling is I doesn't know what he's talking about. Make sure, but you may say, "Oh, I'm going to make sure I have my tetanus shot." You may say, "Oh, I'm going to have some of that," but you're going to be in fairly nice hotels, and you're going to you're really not going to be, and it's tourists, and Vietnam really spends a lot of trying to take care of their tourists or whatever. So they tend to, it's not a problem. Yes.
What about the dress? Like, are they on the conservative side? Like, would we be able to wear shorts, or should we wear?
You're going when, May? Boy, if you ask me what the weather would be like, I would say it's either going to be 70 or 90. It's one of these things. I mean, it's one of these things is that it's kind of like March is kind of dreary, and then in May, like in April, and towards the beginning of May, just kind of get really hot. At least in Hanoi, okay? Ho Chi Minh or Saigon is pretty much hot all the time. I would say wearing shorts is fine. People, nowadays it's kind of changed and conservative, but not that conservative. So wearing shorts is not a problem. I don't think if you on your itinerary it says you're going to go to like the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum or something like that, it may say, "Oh, I'll wear a pair of pants." Okay. Yeah, but I would say practical, comfortable. But yeah, that's not.
But not for a business meeting. Right. Short term business meetings.
Yeah.
At least business casual.
Yeah, and business, and I would say even in May, you may say, the Vietnamese men may not even have, because it may be hot, they don't necessarily, maybe have a tie or whatever. Right? If you don't have a tie, you can buy a whole bunch of ties, not tie silk, but sort of Vietnamese silk ties you could get, to get them as gifts all the time. But I mean, when I was over there, I hardly ever got there. It's really fancy dressed up.
Yeah. Do you recommend buying just like bottled water, or is it okay drinking out of the tap in, say, the hotel room?
Bottled water. Okay, wherever, unless you're cheap like me, I would put the water and boil it because I want to pay for the bottle. No. Okay, so what you'll find is every hotel you go to will have 2 bottles of water, okay? And they'll tend to replace that every day. So that's Vietnamese basically will drink bottled water. Well, they'll certainly boil it. So the idea of drinking out of the taps, no, that's just not a deal, right? But you can buy, your hotel, you can go down to the local store or whatever, and you buy a big fancy for like $1 or less, okay? A bottle of water. Take it up to your room. even, I think what I would do, every room, you know, like I assume probably at the New Hilton with Earl. Where are you staying in?
Novotel.
Oh, right. So I mean, they all have little coffee pots in the rooms and all that stuff. And I usually say, okay, I'm gonna make my coffee. Okay, this is like more instant coffee. I like Vietnamese instant coffee. You just pour the bottled water. Okay, that's just the same. If I don't have the bottled water, I'll use that. But I would, you know, just be
It's
careful.
the same thing with like brushing your teeth and stuff.
I always use the tap water when I brush my teeth. But I would be saying, yeah, I would just, like I said, because you're only going for 10 days, I would be careful. Yeah. Yes.
For our 2 day trips, when we go to Halong Bay and the Gucci tunnels, are mosquitoes more of a problem there once we venture outside?
I don't think, yeah, I think it's something, maybe you can bring a bottle of, you know, we're good, but yeah, but it's not something you worry about. Yeah. Yeah, you'll like Halong Bay. It'll be interesting to just, yeah, you're worried about mosquitoes. Yeah. Yeah, Halong Bay. You probably going to do a boat trip out there. Yeah. Okay. You know, maybe buy one of these mosquito guard. Which you probably nowadays in Vietnam they don't have 7-Eleven, but they're starting to have more and more like convenience stores. And then at the hotel, just ask them where you can get. People at hotels tend to be very helpful. If you want to buy like whatever that mosquito spray, just to be safe or run long, or wear a long sleeve shirt. That's probably in long pants. That's probably the best protection from mosquitoes. Okay. I mean, I've gone to hotels and when at night there's a mosquito net, right? But that's usually been more in terms of like the countryside.
We talked to Andre Colabat about this as well, and I went in because there are mosquito-borne diseases in lots of countries, including Vietnam, but really not in the cities. But we're going to Gucci tunnels and we're going to Halong Bay, and the general advice is to cover, like colored clothing, long sleeves, long pants, and I don't check luggage. I do only carry-on, so I'm buying a small bottle of deep repellent, and I'm going to buy the kind. They say don't spray it on, that doesn't work, but actually rub it on your wrists and ankles, around your hairline, and your neck, and that tends to work. And the big thing is, when we're in Halong Bay, we're going to be on paths going to the boat. Don't go. We're going to run into mosquitoes if you start going off the paths or back in. So just stay on the general paths. This is such a huge tourism nowadays. So if there's not a big influx of mosquito-borne illnesses, but you got to be smart about it. And I am absolutely going to take precautions. And every time I go out, I'm going to put my heat on just because I get mosquito bites really easily too. I take chances. I tend to be really. I am a adventurous tourist. I've been all over, but I'm a cautious tourist because I don't want to get sick. It turns into a hurry if I don't feel good. And so I never brush my teeth with water out of the faucet. You're okay to drink drinks with ice in Vietnam, which is always true in China, because all of the ice is made with filtered water, so that's okay. But I will never eat a salad or raw vegetables when I'm in Vietnam because why? You don't know what it was washed with. It was washed. So cooked food, you're going to be fine. I eat on the streets in China all the time, so I'll do that in Vietnam as well. But I'm going to be cautious about making sure it's a stationary place as opposed to one that's been wheeled around, which are a little less.
And what you'll find is the fruit is really good. Okay, and I agree. I wouldn't. If you go to a fancy hotel, the salad bars and things like that are fine. But a lot of they have like dragon fruit, or you have pineapples or things like that. All of that stuff, it's going to be. Feel free to eat it because when you peel it, so if you peel off the skin, you're fine. But you'll find out that the fruit there is just great. And so when you go, you may be at a hotel and they'll have fruit for breakfast or like little buffet bars. That'll be all, or mangoes or things like that because they're all going to be. But you're right. Be careful. Don't might as well wash your teeth. okay, with, it's easy to do. Right? But the other thing is, don't worry too much. I think the worries of that people. Or, boy, I feel sick, I'm taking Imodium. No, that doesn't work. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, next time, well, we'll talk a little bit about today. Next time, I think I'm going to bring my whole suitcase and show you exactly what I have. So that you can, if I get that. So you can see exactly how, what you need to think about and really the clothing that you wear. So bathing suit for the Long Bay Day, you need cover up. So shorts and a t-shirt or cover up. Men bathing suits are fine, you don't need shorts on top of them, but you need not bare chested. So wear a shirt of some kind. And then most of the places that we go, cleavage is not so good, so be careful about that. I usually bring a jacket just in case you get in there and the presenter is really dressed up. I've got a jacket I throw on, but I probably bring two. So you'll see me in the same ones over and over again. If we're in a religious place, you don't want really short shorts, you want longer shorts or skirt just so that it's not offensive. Is it safe to get in the water? It is, yeah.
Oh, I know where you're going. I've been there. Yeah.
Major tourist.
Yeah, they're going to ask you if you want to do canoeing, I think. And I was there and we swam from one, and it's not like this big beach that you would see in, Ocean City, whatever. Yeah.
It's not Bronco.
No.
For your portrait.
Relax, enjoy. You'll come back, as I tell people, you'll come back looking at the world a little bit differently, especially if you've never really been in a, less developed country. It'll be, yes.
Any types of dishes or herbs that are either regional or specific to Vietnam that you try?
Dishes?
Yeah, a meal, besides like food.
Like I said, I like to find Hanoi much better. Okay, because there is a difference between the north and the south. It's actually, the north and the south, there's not much difference in the food. The middle is actually different. Try the beer. Okay, and that's, and it's one of these things, and I know it's okay, but the Vietnamese, it's like the biggest beer drinkers in the world. Right? And you will walk around Hanoi, and what you'll see, especially around 5, 6 o'clock at night, you will see all of these, like beer places. What's called beer hoi. And basically it's kind of like an outdoor and out cafe. And there'll be just men sitting on the little stools or whatever, sitting there drinking beer, and the food is good, and I would certainly eat one because I eat there all the time actually. And the beer is like 45, 50 cents a glass. And it's like, yes,
Is there a brand that's...
No, it's kind of like the beer that was made the day before. It comes in and they just kind of have it coming out of the keg. I mean, I was in one place where I've had 4 glasses of beer because they weren't very big, and the entire bill for the beer was 60 cents. Yeah, so right? Yeah, this was in, but I mean, the bottled beer, and I'm not saying go, but there really are, that's sort of really part of Vietnamese culture is eating and drinking and things like that. And if you could go and just kind of, I'm sure if you go, somebody will come up and talk to you, right? And then it's just sort of, you get more in terms of that's what life is like there as opposed to. That's what, businessmen will do that, and you'll see it all over.
We didn't think Vietnam to be scary. It to be a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
And you guys are future business leaders, so look at a country that's in that developing stage. You may work for riding with some of the little ladies in the park. It is a fabulous experience, especially if you have blonde hair or you're African American. You look different from what they're accustomed to seeing with Americans. And then sitting in a beer garden, I don't like beer, but I'm going to sit in a beer garden. Lots of fun. You guys can but because you get to know somebody, and there might be a little old man there, and he doesn't speak great English. And that's my head. Those are the kinds of memorable experiences that 20 years from now, you're going to go, I think differently because we were in Vietnam. And I hope we also say, I didn't get any diseases I'm not expecting, and I ate unusual food, and I'm willing to try unusual food somewhere else because I tried different things. Now, I did tell my travel agent that we wanted Vietnamese food, but we also wanted places that had food that's more familiar too. So we had breakfast every morning in our hotels. You're going to see there's trying something. And I'm not terribly adventurous here. I do live in other countries because you have the opportunity. And I like octopus. We do. Because I'm in Greece and from the ceiling is trying to good. So be open to the experience of it. And part of the experience is not hanging out in the hotel or not just hanging out together. Go sit in a place that's very Vietnamese and try to engage with the people that are there.
And Vietnamese food, number one, it's not spicy at all. Okay, if you buy the pho, you put in the chili, but it's not spicy. It consists of a lot of pork, a lot of vegetables, and tofu. Okay, but it's not sort of. Yes, there is strange. Yes, you can go have dog, but you don't have. But there are some strange food. But on average, it's not really that strange. It's pretty much okay, and it's just good, healthy food. You're going to be amazed at how healthy the food is. Yes.
Would you go to like their casinos?
If you want to go to a casino, you're going to have to go to Halong Bay. I don't think there's one right now in Hanoi. Okay, might be. There also is one outside of Da Nang, but you would have to have your passport because Vietnamese are not allowed to go to the casino.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
We go to Halong Bay. I don't know how. That
Oh.
may be an option while we're there if you want to do that instead of something else.
No.
But we'll have to.
And if you want to meet Chinese tourists, go to a casino. Okay, because I guarantee 95% of the people in the casino are Chinese tourists or big smokers.
Why can't they go to the casino?
It's because actually Vietnamese are big gamblers, but I think the government is this idea that if people are going to go and they really can't afford it, so they're trying to avoid more of the social ills of it. I think there's been sort of the idea that maybe they'll change it. But my wife's Vietnamese, but she has an American passport, so we did go to one in Da Nang, but she was able to go in because we had to bring her American passport. She likes to gamble, I don't. But I mean, that's just the way it is. But yeah, just enjoy this.
Would you ever move back?
I plan on retiring. Right? We're the little person with the sitting on the buffalo and the beach. That's what I plan on retiring. That's in the middle of Vietnam. Yeah, that's my goal.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, you can find my email or whatever, okay? And so if you have any questions, you can feel free to email. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Enjoy that. I'll still be around when you come back.
Okay, before our next presentation, I want to show you a couple things. Yeah.
You'll find that most places like cell phones at the hotel, the electricity will be, even though they kind of have ground over there, the hotels will have no problem. The only thing that I found out that I had trouble with is every once in a while if I have a computer and it's 3-pronged, so that you may figure out if you can just like have a 3-prong adapter to 2, that may be helpful. So instead of, you can buy one over there at a little electric store, but that would be the only thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. Okay, so goodbye, Professor Cashline. Okay, so we're going to go through all of this in great detail next time. but I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to look through some of the things on our site so that you have some sense before next time, because I know some of you are getting ready to start shopping for what you need while you're in Vietnam. So let me show you some of what I've added in here since last time we spoke. Okay, our flights are listed here. You should make a copy of this or send a copy of it to your parents, significant others, so that they have a sense. Our flight is leaving here on Tuesday, May 18th at 9:41 in the morning. You're gonna have to go through customs, and so please be standing at the ticket counter by 7:41, and that's really as late as you want to be. So earlier is better. There's going to be traffic. It's a work morning. So I live about half an hour from the airport, and I'm going to leave before 6. So be sure you leave plenty of time to get to the airport to get checked in. Yes. Let me ask Kelly. I don't know. Usually you just get there on your own, but since you're in comfort, maybe she's got something. I will get back to you on that one. Yes, ma'am. Same question. Yeah, let me check and see. She hasn't mentioned it, but she may. So I will zip you all an email about that one. So all of your flights are here, and you'll see it's a long flight. By the time we have a couple of stops to get there, bring stuff to do, so download some videos. The nice thing is flying with a group is kind of fun because you get up and you wander around and you'll be sitting near each other and such, so there's some things to do. But be prepared for that amount of time on the flights. Books, bring some snacky stuff. They feed you constantly, but you might want to bring some snacky stuff. So the food, the flights are listed here, and then I have.
Cheryl, can I mention something about flights?
Yeah, please do.
So the big flight is going to be going there. The big flight or the long flight's going to be from Detroit to Incheon. That's going to be like what was that? 14.
I just put down. It's about 14
hours or
yeah.
so. I looked at Delta's website because I wanted to see what they would have for our seats. There is Wi-Fi available, but you have to pay for the Wi-Fi. They do have what they call a complimentary Delta Studio access, so that's like movies and music. But if you want to do that on your phone or on your iPad, you need to download the GoGo Entertainment app, GoGo Entertainment app. There is also, that's if you want to access it on your phone or your iPad. They do have USB and C power, so make sure that you bring your lightning cable or whatever cables to charge with the USB output or input, whatever. There is also, at least for the long flight, Detroit to Korea, there's a seatback entertainment screen. So if you want to pack your phone or pack your iPad or pack your computer, at least on the really long flight, you'll have your individual screen in front of you. So just as a heads up.
Isn't it good to travel with somebody who researches on the airline industry? Both of our hotels have in-room safes, and I believe they're going to give us our passports back. You have to leave them in the safe. That's why you'll see in the instructions to make a copy and photocopy of the information page in your passport. I also tend to not travel with my laptop. I tend to travel just with an iPad, and iPads fit in the safe too. So that's something to keep in mind. You should. We're in nice hotels, so it shouldn't be a problem. But I tend to stick it in there anyway. I put the itinerary up, and everything is confirmed right now except one visit. They're still working on the details of. So the first day we don't get in until 9:30 at night, and so I love when the travel agent says, you get to the hotel at 11 p.m. and the rest of the day at leisure. So you do have a little while, but next morning we're going to start at 9 a.m. Yes, sir.
Is that so local time? So like as for here,
13 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll have had a long day. I travel internationally a lot. I don't tend to take pills anyway, so I don't tend to take any drugs on the plane to make me sleep or whatever. For Asia, I typically don't have trouble adjusting. And if I need to fall asleep on the plane, I do, but I usually don't. 9 in the morning, it'll be 24 hours, but we're getting there at 11:30 at night, so I'll go to bed and I'll be okay, and I usually stay okay. Coming back, 5 days after I get back, I crash. So it's a disaster 5 days after. but going, I really don't have trouble. And the people that have the most trouble on trips I've been on are the ones the first visit the next morning when they took drugs on the plane and they're still so drowsy and they just have trouble staying awake. So if you're a nervous traveler and you need to take something to calm you down, okay. But in general, you're gonna have people that entertain you to keep you kind of busy. You're gonna get there at 11:30 at night, so it would be time to go to bed anyway for some of you.
And also, the flight, we're going to be flying on a Airbus A350 going from Detroit to Korea. So the newer planes, there's new pressurization systems and they changed the lights and stuff to kind of minimize the jet lag effects. So, I mean, it's still 11 hours ahead. So right now it's almost 2 in the morning in Vietnam. So it's going to be like completely flipped.
Yeah.
But at least they're trying their best to kind of minimize those effects.
It's just like it's an all-nighter, and you get in and you go to sleep. So the first day, now the one thing that I'm really insistent upon is you have to be on time, because pointing is offensive, shouting is offensive, getting drunk in public is offensive. Now, having a few beers is not offensive, but you've got to be careful about not being the ugly American when we're there. And so being late is offensive. So in the mornings, I'll show you what we typically do first thing in the morning to get everybody gathered. But we wait 5 minutes and then we leave. And if we leave and you're not on the bus, that's a problem. So we can't be late for sessions, and you see what kind of traffic we deal with. So a few minutes can make a huge difference in terms of our ability to make it to the presentation on time. So we're going to start by the embassy, and that's my favorite thing to do when we start off a trip, is get a sense for what the embassy is saying about our country in Vietnam and how Vietnam is developing. It's a great place to ask questions, and then we're going to play the rest of the day. We're going to do the longest race, just a tour to get a sense of Hanoi, and then we'll do our welcome dinner that first night. The next day, we're going to an auto industry plant, that's confirmed, and we're going to Hatch, and I think you're going to love Hatch. It is an incubator for new businesses, and what they're going to do ahead of time, and I'm waiting to get them from them, and I'll send you the information once I do, is they're going to have a series of their entrepreneurs that have business issues, and they're going to send them to us ahead of time to say, hey, how would you address this particular issue? And then if all goes well when we're there, you're going to sit down with some of the business leaders and talk about your recommendations for the company. To help catch businesses and stuff. That could be kind of fun. And then the next day, that's Saturday, and we're going to go to Halong Bay that day. That's a whole day. It's 4.5 hours to get there and back all in the same day. So bring entertainment for the bus, because we're going to be on the bus for a good long while. It is gorgeous. It's one of the top attractions in the world. So we're going to go out on the boat. If you get seasick at all, bring some. It's not drowning. Bovine is the one that I think is better. I do, and so I'll pop a bovine because bovine's good because you don't get drowsy with it. It's not as drowsy as Germany. So that if the rocking bothers you, pack some of that. So that'll be all day, and then the next day, that's it. Then we're going to Ho Chi Minh City after that. We'll spend the rest of the time down in Ho Chi Minh City. We've got an early flight. I think it's 9 a.m. Oh, it's 11. That's right. She was trying to be kind so that we didn't leave so early that you didn't have to get up really, really early that day. And then we get to the Novotel, and then that afternoon is the foodie motorbike tour. So whoever's doing that, if you're not doing that, you have the chance to explore and see some of Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City. We'll talk next time about having clothes made and things. I've had a lot of stuff made over in Asia, and I have been almost always very, very happy. So we'll talk about how to think about doing that. The next day we're going to go to Unavailable. That's the name of the company. And then we'll see manufacturing from a Vietnamese company's perspective. And then we got a really good session at Pepsi. We're meeting with the CEO of Pepsi Vietnam. And so I think he will be interesting as well. The only visit that's not officially confirmed is the stock market, and we know we're going, just the topics and who we're going to meet with is still up in the air. And then we're going to meet with Citibank to talk a little bit about the banking industry and how do you help a company move forward in Vietnam.
Then we're going to see Siemens. I think Professor Kashlak is going to talk about that in class next time. And then the Coochie Tunnels. Again, Coochie Tunnels is another area that I'll deep up for sure because we will be out, but we're going to stay on the main paths. And then we do the farewell dinner that night. We leave the next morning pretty early, and we get in at right after midnight on the 11th. So we're travel all day on the 10th. We get back at about just after midnight that night. And again, I'll check about transportation home that evening as well. So the itinerary is posted now. I'll go through it in a lot more detail next time. I also posted all these travel tips, and I'm going to keep adding to it. I think it's pretty comprehensive right now. And as I said, I'm going to go through all of them. But because you're starting to think about it and thinking about the travel, look at least through the pack before you go site and see, getting those adapters. The hotels, most of them do have American kinds of adapters, so you don't need an adapter for your computer and such. But I don't take a chance. I bring my adapters anyway. You might want the little money pouch thing. I'll bring one next time to show you what I use, and get it on Amazon at plenty of time if you want one. I'm pretty insistent you go to the Smart Traveler and register yourself. I think I've told you that before, but it's really easy to do. And what happens is the State Department knows that you're in Vietnam and where you are. So if anything happens, they can connect with you. If there's any, if there's an earthquake while we're there, or a tsunami, it's not tsunami season. If there's anything that happens while we're there in another part of the world that could be concerning to us, you'll get a text about it. So I think it's important to register with the State Department. So I urge you to do that. Two things. I think I told you once before. I have my phone on an international plan, and I pay very little. I have Sprint, and I don't pay much a month at all for that. Both of our hotels have Wi-Fi, and you're going to have Wi-Fi in your room. If you don't have Wi-Fi calling on your phone now or in your iPad, set it up. Just go in and Google how do you set up Wi-Fi calling, because that's free, and you can FaceTime. You can do all of that on your iPad for free. I have it set up so that you can call me and I can call and text, and I pay minimal. I think it's 20 cents a minute or something while I'm in Vietnam. Carrie, which
Verizon.
Yeah, Verizon, and their charges seem different. So check with your company ahead of time about the service while you're overseas. And the other thing is you're going to want to change money. You're also going to want to potentially use a credit card when you're there. Contact your credit card companies now and tell them where you're going to be and when, so that they don't shut off your cards. You might even tell them you're going to be in Detroit and Seoul in case you stop and buy something in one of those places. They're getting pretty careful about fraud now, and you don't want them to shut off your card. I've been with a student where the machine took her card, and then it was on her first day, and she had no capacity for money the rest of the time. So this, the travel tips has what to think about before you go. It has things for the airport, and it has things in Vietnam. And as I said, I keep thinking, and the phone and the credit card came up the other day. I thought, oh, I haven't added those in. But I'll keep adding to it, and we'll go through all of them at our next class. Also on here.
Also, the Incheon airport, the airport in Korea, got ranked the #2 airport in the world after Singapore. So I've been there several times. My dad worked for Korean Airlines. And it's an awesome airport with a lot of really good food. They even have like a hotel in there too for people who just want to nap during their layover and stuff. So a lot of duty-free shops in the Incheon airport. So, no taxes.
Well, that's the one where I couldn't find a Diet Coke. So they have a lot of stuff, but I've stopped drinking soda. We'll see if that sticks. One of my students from 20 years ago is Japanese, and she married a Vietnamese man. Lived in Vietnam for 10 years. She's now back to living in Japan, but she works in Vietnam and travels back and forth regularly. She gave me a list of restaurant recommendations. There's some really good ones in there. She told you what kind of food and things. She was a little cautious about Hanoi, and I listed that her number 1 and 17 are her favorite Hanoi. In Ho Chi Minh City, she said, I like all of them, and she goes there a lot. So if you want some restaurant recommendations, those are posted as well. Let's see, what was the other thing I put in here? Okay, the other thing is you have one more presentation to do. And I listed this in here. If you look at our itinerary, you'll see exactly where the presentations come from. Let me blow this up a little bit. Oops, it's blown up too much. Not enough. Okay, so I want each of the teams that you were on before to do no more than a 5-minute presentation. And it's due next week. But what I'll tell you is next week I really want to focus on making sure we get all of your questions answered and we go through all of the tips and all. What I did on my last trip with students is, as we were on the bus going to the next location, I had whoever was doing Plagio group was the presenter that day. And so while we were on the bus, you did a presentation, so it's really fresh in our mind. If we go through all these presentations next week, you're going to forget what unavailable is versus Siemens versus Citibank. So I want you to send them to me, but we're probably going to do them while we're abroad as opposed to here. Okay? So the presentations and they're supposed to get it to me tonight. It'll be in the next couple of days. They're going to give us a little background on each of the companies. Some of these, like an overview of Hanoi, not too hard to do. Holding it to under 10 minutes is going to be the hard thing. So with Hanoi, if you are Jeff or Brian, what should you eat in Hanoi? What are cool sites in your free time to do? Give us a little bit of history of Hanoi as well. So that's what we're looking for. U.S. Embassy, what kind of things can you learn from an embassy? So, and what's the history of the embassy in Hanoi? So a little bit of background. Each of these companies, you'll find some things online. The speakers are listed on the itinerary, so you'll find some information there as well. But for the most part, so something like unavailable, maybe a little harder to find information about, the travel agents can give us some that will kind of get you started. If you have Hatch, well, it's an incubator. What can you tell us about incubators in general, and then anything you can find on Hatch? And if you find if the travel agent gives us the name of the speaker, you may be able to find something on the speaker too. Just enough to help generate questions, because the sessions are so much better if we ask the questions. And really that's where the learning is going to come from. And the last thing is your journal. I don't care what form your journal takes, but I do care that you write a journal. And so you can do it on your iPad, keep your iPad with you. You can write it out longhand. You can do a photo journal where you're putting pictures in there, what you see and sort of your reactions to things. But I want something that you're going to keep afterwards, and I want you to think about what you're learning. And the question you should be asking yourself throughout the time is, why are we here? Why are we at this visit? What am I learning? And how can I apply it in the future? So those are the kinds of things I'm looking for out of your journal. So that's posted on here too, so you get a sense. So if you want to do a spiral bound notebook, throw one in your suitcase so you have it there. Okay, let me make sure that was everything I wanted to hit today. I think so. So company presentations, reflection journal, sending the Vietnam flights to your family, the itinerary. I'll update it again in case there's a speaker or two missing, and restaurant recommendations. That's everything on the main page that I wanted to talk with you about. Any questions on any of that? Yes? It should be a PowerPoint. Okay? So if you do it as a PowerPoint, submit the PowerPoint to me, and then when we're on the bus, you'll do the presentation. Sometimes, one of the things I like to do is if the bus is leaving at 9 a.m., I'll say that let's meet for breakfast at 8:30. And so you can be eating breakfast while somebody's doing a presentation. And that way we're sure everybody's on time and we take off together, and you get a quick overview before we get going. And just because you're assigned to unavailable doesn't mean you can't go look up information on the other. But this cuts down your workload, so you don't have to go look at other companies if you don't want to. Any questions?
Do you mind just keeping us updated with the custom clothing, like you said? Because I know I would want to get a suit from there, because when I got a suit from China, it actually one of my favorites. So.
Yeah. Next week when we're here, the very first thing that's going to happen right at 1:30, our 2 travel agents are going to be online with us. And so that's one of the questions: where should we plan on getting clothing made? And then we have to figure out how to get there the first day, so you have enough time to get it made. Make sure we have enough time. There's 2 things that you can do in terms of having clothing made. If you have a jacket you love, you can bring it and they will copy it. Or for my kids, they'll go to the fanciest websites and they'll get pictures of these suits and coats and things and have me have them made and bring back. I used to work in China regularly, so I was back and forth all the time. So I've had tremendous success, and I've been to numerous Asian countries where I've had clothes made. I haven't done in Vietnam yet, but I am this time, so I'll have something made while I'm there. So yeah, either bring the item and make that a piece of the clothing that you wear or bring a picture of something you like. If you're having something made for somebody else, they need to be measured really well. So that probably means go as if they're getting measured for a tux at a good place, but make sure it's, you know, you want arm length, you want more than just the standard pre-measurements. So make sure you get, the more detail you have, the better. I've also brought my own fabric a couple of times. One of my sons goes to the Kentucky Derby every year, and he is regularly in the newspaper for the crazy suits that he wears when he's there. So they'll find some crazy Lily Pulitzer fabric, and I'll take that with me, and they'll make it over there. So you can do that as well. But some of the fabrics are just gorgeous. So and a lot of things don't fit Americans so well because we're built bigger than the Vietnamese. So having it made often means it will fit you really, really well.
So 2 quick questions about that. So in terms of getting a suit made, like how much are you talking? Like, do you have an idea of what costs are? And the other thing is, if you're getting something made, aren't they just going to measure it? Like, why would you need to bring another garment if they're just going to measure it?
If it's made for you, they will just measure you.
Okay.
But if you bring the garment, they'll replicate.
Okay.
If you just tell them, I want a suit that lapels may be wider than you want and such. So if you have a suit that's perfect for a picture of one that's exactly what you want, that's
Gives them an idea.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's better for replication.
And so price-wise?
Okay, so the last suits I had made were in Thailand, and Thailand tends to be a little bit more expensive, and it was $125 for a suit. I typically spend under $100. But when we talk to Leela next time, let's ask her what we should expect. Okay? Because I benchmark based on what they say. And I would tell you, bargaining in an Asian country is so fun. And, you know, whatever the price, I typically look for 10% of what the starting price is. And I think I really got a good deal. But sometimes, you know, people know that. And so that's not always a great deal. But you've got to be careful about not over-bargaining because you don't want people to lose face. And at the end of the day, an extra $1 for us versus the value for the Vietnamese is pretty substantial. You realize that their annual salary is about $2,200 US, which is they don't have much money in many of the markets, and so you want to bargain. You don't want to overpay for things, but you want to be respectful, and you don't want to get loud, and you don't want to get to the point where somebody cries because you push them too far, and they don't want to say no at that point because they think you have moved to that point. So just make it fun, but don't win at all costs. Okay. What other quick questions? Yes.
If we are checking a bag,
Yeah.
do we have to pay?
No. Okay. Some of you will check bags. I don't, just because I've lost luggage before, and I pack what's the name of the French bags that fold up? Thank you. I pack a big long trunk that folds up in my bag, and then that's what I check on the way home. Because you're going to buy stuff there, and buying cheap luggage is really easy when you're there. If you're going to check a bag, or if you drink a lot of water, I drink a couple gallons a day. And so I tend to, if I check a bag, which I'm not going to do, I pack it with bottled water, because when I arrive at the hotel, they don't always have water in the hotel. I don't have to go find water right away. I've got bottles with me. So I pack stuff that I won't need on the way back. I'm a fussy eater. I guarantee you I'll have M&Ms in my bag. Okay, and I'll probably have some granola bars too. So if the meal is not my favorite, I've got stuff that I like to eat. And so that's stuff that makes room for souvenirs later. But really try not, you don't need to take a lot of clothes. You guys see each other every day. You don't always look your best. And so you don't have to look your best all day. Today you look your best. Today is absolutely your best. But you don't have to be overdressed up, and there will be laundry services in the hotel that's typically pretty inexpensive as well if you need to have something washed. Yeah, absolutely, and they come back. Yeah, really very nice. So don't overpack. Free yourself up for bringing some items on the back end, because I'm guessing that will be important to you. What else? We need to answer to that. Good?
You can always go to Delta's website if you're interested in what their luggage policy is.
Good. I think it's 50 pounds and
Yeah,
standard size.
as far as
International,
pricing
you
and stuff is keeping out.
well, your first one is free on Delta, right?
I don't know.
Wait, I think
Yeah,
your second one is
$100.
Yeah, so if they're going to charge you for this on international, is the second one?
It's $100.
Is it really on the?
Yeah.
Okay. So you definitely don't want to overpack, because I guarantee you will buy way more than you think you will. while you're in Vietnam, because you're going to be amazed at some of the things you see. So don't overpack so you don't have to pay luggage fees on the way back. Okay. I think I have quite a treat for you today. While we're in Vietnam, a lot of what we're going to hear about is the American War, and it is a communist country, so there's going to be a lot of propaganda. And I remember growing up as the Vietnam War was ending, and I know the impact it had on this country, and I think it's really important for you all to get a sense of that as well. So I asked Hans Underwood to be here today, and I love when I ask somebody to tell me, to give me a bio, and they start out with their family. It means that somebody's centered properly. So Hans has been married, and to Lyndon, he has 3 grown kids, and 3 grandkids, and a dog. He lives in Maryland, and he is German by background. In fact, he was not a U.S. citizen when he went over to Vietnam. So he fought for the Americans, even though he was a German citizen at the time. And he fought in, he was a, don't tell me, in the artillery helicopter, ACH?
134th Assault Helicopter.
Assault helicopter. So this is a fighting helicopter unit, and I can't remember the name of what you did while you were there. You weren't the gunner. You were the
I was crew chief.
Crew chief.
On the ground as a mechanic and flight as a gunner.
Good. Okay, so he's crew chief. He has multiple educational work that he's done. But he fought. If you think about Vietnam, we're going to Hanoi up north. Ho Chi Minh City is down to south, and then it goes along the coast. And he was located along the coast, sort of in the middle, where he was fighting. I sent you the link to the website. I know some of you have gone there. The music is fabulous. I was listening to music today, just in the background as I was doing some other things. So great music from that era. Amazing pictures when you look at these people that were younger than you all, that were over there fighting. Hans was there for about 18 months.
No, I was there for 14 months. I had my tour cut short.
Oh, okay. So he was there for 14 months, and not all of them came home. They also wrote some stories. If you've ever been to the Vietnam Memorial and you've seen people that have been influenced by the Vietnam, it was a tough war because it was on the ground. A number of people certainly died while they were in the war. Agent Orange has affected a lot of people as well. I met Hans when he started working at Loyola, and anytime I had a computer issue, I knew it was going to be resolved very quickly. Hans worked in our tech services for a number of years, but after the war, he went back over to Germany and worked in a technology company over there as well. He is a member of the 134th Assault Helicopter Unit. He runs their website, and so if you've taken a look, he's in charge of that. There were 860 men in the unit. 189 are deceased at this point. Some of them were killed in action. Some are dead as a result of Agent Orange. And Hans also works with an organization that restores aircraft from that era as well. So he's a member of that group too. And he has retired a couple of years ago. We miss him terribly. And he's going to talk a little bit about the Vietnam War from the perspective of somebody who was there fighting. Do you want me to pull up the site? Do you want me to pull up the site?
Yeah, go ahead and launch that.
Remind me of the full address. 134. Oh, there it is. I got it.
AHC.com. Wow. That's the history page. Okay.
Okay.
Control minus. That'll bring it down to size. Keep going.
Go home.
Yeah, you can.
Walking down the street, pretty woman, I kinda like to be pretty.
Boy, the technology's changed here. Don't even see the projector. Used to be have a lot of meetings in here. I retired here about 5 years ago, and I was here for 16 years. So came here from Germany. Actually got the job on a golf course in Germany. Talk about networking. How old's the class? Age?
Range from 22 to 32.
32.
No, sir. Just look the yeah, 22. Think about getting ready to be drafted at that age, or even younger. I was 20 years old when I got my notice. And at the time, the draftees, a lot of the draftees were becoming, going into infantry. I'm not real fond of walking. And so I took an extra year and flew. That flying has kind of gone through my family. I've got one of my sons is a retired Navy pilot who now flies for Southwest. Unfortunately, they don't fly to Vietnam. So they just fly around the United States pretty much in the Caribbean. Now they're going to do Hawaii. His son, no doubt, is going to be a pilot. From 3 years old, he's been playing with C-130s and toy airplanes. A lot of fun. How many of you had a chance to look at the website? Or how many of you were able to get on the website? That's the first thing. It's not an easy site to get to. If you have a tablet, you can forget that. It's only from PC or Mac, and it's run on. It's a Flash program, so it runs on Adobe Flash Player. So it kind of helps to have Adobe Flash Player loaded on the PC or Mac. Well, Mac doesn't need it, but PCs do. And it also doesn't like Chrome. When I created this site back in '97, Flash was a big deal. Anybody heard of Flash? Okay, so it's still around a little bit. Kind of hard to program. The site itself is about 15 gigs. There are thousands of pictures. And, actually, here's one of my door gunner. That's my ship. There's a gunship. This is the type of aircraft that's sitting over at Glen L. Martin Aviation Museum right now. That ship that's sitting over there was in my unit when I was in Vietnam. It provided close air support for me. Probably saved my behind a couple of times. We used to hang around out in the country like that, or like that. The unit still gets together every year. We started having an annual reunion in 2004, and slowly people have been dying over the years. A lot of them due to Agent Orange. We used to spray that stuff. There'll be a picture along here somewhere that has a picture of in the middle of the aircraft with a huge tank sitting in it. And it looks like a crop duster. It's got the sprayers coming out of the side. And then we didn't fly at very high altitudes most of the time. We a couple feet off the ground or above the tree line. We usually had to clean leaves and debris out of the intake of the aircraft, the air intake of the engine. That's about how low we flew. There's a kill zone from 0 to 500 feet, so you really want to move fast and stay low. So, and we stopped. The size of the site is so big that it periodically stops. Oh, one of the pooch maids. I was pretty lucky. The unit that I was with was right on the South China Sea. So when we weren't flying, we got a chance to spend a little time on the beach. We had our own motorboat. We had some water skis. So it wasn't always doom and gloom. When the aircraft went down for maintenance, which is every 100 hours, the crews were off to do whatever they want. Unfortunately, Tuiwa was never on limits, so the town I was stationed near was Tuiwa. Tuiwa, do you know where Cameron Bay is, anybody? Do you know the map of Vietnam? Okay. Tuiwa was north of Cameron Bay and way south of Da Nang. So we flew the Central Highlands. We got up into the mountains. And, living up in the mountains where it was pretty primitive. There's some pictures in there of the mountain yard villages. People living in houses that are on stilts. And, it was interesting that listening to the previous speaker, Vietnam has changed a lot since I was there. I had never been back. Thought about going back a lot, but never got around to it. I have a friend that actually lives in, that was in the unit, Kirk Mutt. He lives in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. And he said, one thing that struck me, he says, the Vietnamese got over the war. And we just haven't. So it was an interesting comment. This was a Christmas party. This is the road to Quy Nhon. Now, the roads are paved nowadays, but that's Route 1, that's a major highway. So it was a little rough. And we stopped again.
Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of flying in the helicopters, or what your role was, what you were supposed to be doing?
My goal was to stay alive. Primary goal. Going out in the morning, there wasn't a day that you didn't get shot at. So you pretty quickly got adjusted to that and just dealt with it. Kind of like living in some inner cities. You just get used to it if you can. And we did. Lost my train of thought. What were you?
So what did the helicopters do? How did you spend your days?
Okay, like the title, it was an assault helicopter company. We would get up in the morning, run the aircraft up, take off to a designated location, pick up troops. Now we could pick up 6 Americans with full packs in one aircraft and 12 Vietnamese full packs. So I think the previous speaker alluded to the size of the people. Give you an idea. We would fly them to an LZ, a landing zone, drop them off. Sometimes they were quiet. Most of the time they weren't. We'd drop the troops off. They'd go out hunting all day. And we used to call it taking the guys to work. So they'd go out in the jungle all day and hunt people. In the evenings or later on in the day, we might fly back in. We would go park someplace, fly back out, pick them up, move them, and they start the whole thing all over again. Or we take them out into the boonies, and they'd stay out there on patrol for days. One day, we were picking up the 25th Infantry in a pretty hot LZ. But I noticed one guy getting on the aircraft, and I went to high school with the guy. So I just saw him a few weeks ago at a luncheon. I grew up in Frostburg, by the way. Yeah, I was born in Germany. My parents moved to Frostburg, Maryland. Went to high school up there. Went on to school, left Frostburg, went on to school. And then, of course, eventually I got drafted. So I tried to avoid the draft as long as I could. Anyway, when we're in flight, you'd have several gunships that escort you. The gunships only had 4 crew members, and they were equipped with rockets and miniguns and chunkers. Chunker is a grenade launcher on the front of the aircraft, and they provide a really good close cover. That aircraft that's over at Glen L. Martin is a gunship. It's a Mike Balla gunship, and it's restored exactly the way it was when it was in my unit. It was in the unit from 68 through 71. Unit stood down in 71. I was there until 71. That's what I was saying earlier. My tour got cut short. I extended. Not the smartest move I ever made, but I volunteered to stay longer. And in my extension, the unit announced it was standing down. I came in one night. They said, "You're going home tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So why people extend, it's nuts, but people did it all the time.
How did the South Vietnamese do the Americans?
Depends on which South Vietnamese. The North Vietnamese didn't like us too much. The South Vietnamese were pretty neat people. We had workers that worked on the installation, Vietnamese people. The barber, the hooch maids, the maids that took care of the building and our areas, our small areas that we owned when we were gone. I don't know. The only encounter we had with the North Vietnamese was pretty unfriendly. I'm not a big speaker, but if you guys want to just ask questions, go for it. Any questions? Anybody related to anybody that was in the armed services? Okay. Anybody related to anybody that's been in combat?
The last speaker said we lost the war. How do you
Not a good thing to say to Vietnam vet.
How do you react to that?
I don't think we lost the war. The political, I think it was politics that lost the war. As far as soldiers, we went over there, we did a job, and hopefully we came home. And, so I feel that I did my part, at least keeping the North Vietnamese from going too far south.
I'm just going to talk about coming home and what it's like to come back.
Coming home was almost as bad as being there. We came home and the politics, the anti-war, the demonstrations, it was pretty bad. I made the mistake of coming home in uniform. And I landed in San Francisco. Man, you get spit at, you get called all kinds of names, but that was very unpleasant. After I got home, never wore the uniform for quite a while. Got out of the Army, and a year later I went back in. So I did the 20-year time. I'm glad I did now. I mean, I love it every month when I get the paycheck. It's okay. Both my sons are going to be enjoying that paycheck too. One already is. The one that's the Southwest pilot. Any more questions? Go ahead.
So, my understanding of the Vietnam War was it's kind of I guess where kind of modern warfare started, and that is kind of the first counterinsurgency, also a lot of politics involved, and really the first time we did urban combat. Do you feel like you guys were well trained going into it, or you had to mix up on one line?
Training happened in Vietnam. I went to survival school. Nothing like what I encountered when I got there. The first things I remember coming in the country, we were in a commercial jet. It was a 707, which was a big airplane then. And we were coming into close to Long Binh, and all of a sudden two fighter jets appeared, one on each side of the aircraft. And as we started to get closer to the airfield, started seeing, we're getting closer to the ground, huge potholes, craters. And I thought, oh my God, this is really happening. And we landed at Benoit, got off the plane, and the first thing that struck me was this god-awful smell. And the way they got rid of human waste in Germany, in Vietnam, was to burn it. They mixed it with JP4 in 55-gallon drums. And if you were a real bad soldier, you got to do that. So you stirred this stuff and you burned it. So the smell of that was everywhere. So that struck me right away. Then we got on a bus, and the bus was armored. It had armor plates on it. It had all kinds of wire mesh on the windows, and they drove us to the reception center. And there we got processed in, got assigned a barracks, and Benoit was not a really fun place. Within days, we were getting rocketed and mortared and all kinds of fun stuff. And about 2 weeks after that, got on an aircraft, C-130, flew up to Cam Bay, got on a Chinook. They took us to Tuy Hoa. Tuy Hoa was, like I said earlier, it was kind of a neat place. The perimeter of Tuy Hoa was way out. So lobbing a mortar in on the barracks area was next to impossible. So at least at nights when we're back from a flight, we're sleeping fairly comfortable. Other question?
How are those reunions now?
The reunions. You talk about getting over PTSD. It happens at reunions. You got a whole bunch of guys that are dealing with it. I'm dealing with it. But when we sit down at a table and drink a lot of beer, of course we start bringing up the war stories and the memories. The reunions are really cool. So, this year's reunion is at Tulsa, Oklahoma. One of the guys that I served with is a chief of one of the Indian reservations out there. And we're having the reunion in one of the Indian hotels. It's a hotel casino. So this one ought to be something. So, especially in Oklahoma. They move them around, or we move them around from town to town. Last year was in Branson, Missouri. Been to one up in Chicago. Atlanta.
Any around here?
Unfortunately, to have a reunion close to where you live, you have to be the POC. You have to sponsor it. And that is a lot of work. And I'm so involved with stuff that I just don't have the time for it. I love going, but sponsoring one is hard, very hard. Anything else? Yes.
And you said you didn't want to go, but do you have like a favorite memory that you have while you were there?
Yeah, the guys, serving with those guys. R&R, another favorite. I went to Bangkok, Thailand, spent 2 weeks there. I went with 3 Special Forces guys. That was a mistake. These guys were just totally nuts. They carried sawed-off M60s with them. It was interesting. We had a good time, but fun guys to be around, right? Question? This is actually what it looked like to take the troops out. You land on top of a hill and drop everybody off, and then we'll see them later. This is just downtown Trang. The Trang was one of the cities that was on limits, and it was about an hour's flight south of where I was. The Trang was where you got your flight physicals, so you had to keep a current flight physical. And I always enjoyed going down there because I'd spend the night in the Trang Hotel downtown with my M16 and my 38. Got on my Lambretta at the airport, and downtown we went. So I got a chance to experience a little bit of the local cuisine, the local people. I met a guy, I think he was trying to steal my wallet. But anyway, he took me home. We ended up going in his house, having dinner at his house. Again, not a smart move on my part, but I did it anyway, and I'm still here.
So while you were over there, did you do many missions in serving or extracting special forces units or any of the?
Oh, yeah, every day. Well, once in a while they throw in an egg run where you're just going to do drop supplies or sea rations or grenades or stuff like that. Most of the time they were called ace flights. They were assault flights, so we're going in hot and heavy all the time. Yeah, I got 20 air medals. And, you get 1 air medal for every 25 hours of combat. Yeah, you're exposed a little bit.
Another question. So did you finish out your Army career in the same MLS within?
No.
Did you end up switching?
What's really interesting about the Army is my last flight physical was in the United States, which I failed. And it was amazing. It was for depth perception. Now, you don't develop depth perception over time. Got it or you don't. So I had depth perception problems in Vietnam. But it was okay to fly over there, just not good to fly over America. So I got grounded, and I figured if I can't work, if I have to, if I can't fly, I don't want to work on them. Of course, who wants a mechanic that isn't going to fly on it? So, but anyway, I got into administrative jobs after that, and I spent a little time in the recruiting command. So did that until I ran out of family, put in the Army. Put my brothers in, my brother-in-law. Didn't put any of my kids in. Did that for a little while, got tired of that, and I think I did that for 8 years. Then I heard about club management. I thought, well, let's see, I got a business degree. I can run a club. So I got in, I started running officers clubs. And my first officers club was the Gießen Officers Club in Gießen, Germany. That little trip started in 1978, and I came back in 1997. Of course, this time I had a family with me, my wife and kids, and really enjoyed that. We always lived on the economy. I spoke German anyway, it was my first language, and my wife learned German from my kids. My kids picked it up real fast. So got 3 kids that are fluent in German. They all took it to college, easy credit. What else?
How did the American, people over there, how did the American attitude toward the Vietnamese shift during the war? And vice versa?
I never met too many Americans that liked Vietnamese at all. I mean, I used to, whenever we were on the ground dropping troops off, I would leave the aircraft and go feed the kids. We always had tons of sea rations with us. So sea rations had a Nestle bar in it. So Nestle bar broke. And the kids loved those. Then somewhere in there, there's a picture of me out in the middle of this field feeding a bunch of kids. So I never disliked the Vietnamese. I just disliked the people that were shooting at me. So that's the way that worked. Anything else? Yeah.
You said you one of your friends retired there. Do you know anybody else who went back to visit or went back?
Oh, a bunch of them have gone back. A pilot friend of mine that I flew with went back, and he, in fact, on my Facebook page, he said, "Dan, you got to go back. This is the last year that this friend of his is doing the tour." And he lives down in Florida. He's a farmer now. And he went back. He's the one that actually told me that the people had gotten over it. We just aren't dealing with it here. But they loved it. They said it was fantastic. The previous guy was talking about malaria pills. We didn't have a choice. We had to take malaria pills. Not a pleasant experience. But yeah, we did that.
Thank you very much for giving us perspective of Vietnam back then, and especially for what you all sacrificed for us. Thank you.
I wore my Loyola.
Just underneath there, yeah. Okay, so I forget what room we're in next time. We might be here. I'll send you an email about that. Go through and take a look at some of the updates on our Wiggle page. And if you have any questions, let me know in the meantime. But we'll be hitting all of those items pretty hard on the 24th. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. All right. You guys have a great 2 weeks, and I'll see you when we are about to graduate.
Too late for Afghanistan, Iraq, too early for Syria. Yeah, I got some buddies. I got out.
Quick question about shoes.